Ismail has a female friend. They have such a good relationship that they sleep in the same bed and share an ice cream. I asked them to keep a distance. He was impatient. If anything were going to happen between us, it would have happened already. Can't we trust each other a little? Very well. I turned around and found a male best friend. When Ismailin's era didn't come home again at night, I reacted very calmly. He came back at noon, bringing pastries from Hengfulu. Seeing me, he took the initiative to explain rarely. We haven't gathered together for a long time. We drank too much and found an esports hotel to sleep in. But this time it's not the same bed. I slept on the floor. He emphasized it. After all, because of this matter last time, we had a big fight. I accused him of being married but having no sense of boundaries. I insisted on confronting Zara. Sarah is a girl who grew up playing with them in the same compound. Saying she is a girl, but she has a carefree personality. She is on good terms with everyone. More than once, I saw Zara sitting on the laps of these men without restraint, laughing and playing, and even sharing a wine glass without any scruples. At first, he still patiently explained. Later, when he got annoyed, he directly threw out a sentence. If anything were going to happen, it would have happened already. And it wouldn't be your turn to marry me. Then he left by slamming the door. Ironically, his friends advised me. Sarah has been watched growing up. She is just like this. Ismail simply treats her like a child. A child? Is 25 still a child? I was extremely disgusted and said that if they didn't know how to avoid suspicion, we would get a divorce. From then on, Ismail did keep a distance from Sarah for a while. But as a result, Sarah would intentionally or unintentionally taunt me in public. Sister-in-law. Look, I'm not sitting next to Ismail. Right? Ismail, don't go to the second round with us. Lest sister-in-law gets angry. Ismail is not the same Ismail as before. With a rope tied around his neck. I dare not get close. She said these words only when I was present. Naturally, it created a subtle atmosphere. As time passed, my reputation for being petty-minded, jealous, and unreasonable became known to all. My relationship with Ismail also became estranged and indifferent from that time on. Coming back to my senses, I looked at the packaging of the lunchbox in Ismail's hand. The meal I once liked the most now seemed uninteresting. Ismail also noticed my coldness. He put the lunchbox on the table, came over and hugged me. His voice was soft with flattery. Wife, haven't you always wanted to watch a movie? Today I won't go to the company. Let's go watch that movie you wanted to see. It's quite good. That movie was one I had been looking forward to for a long time. As soon as it was released, I invited Ismail. He said he was busy. But a few days later, from Zara's moments, I saw her showing off movie tickets. 2 tickets. Although there was no face shown. But the distinct knuckled hand in the photo, and the wedding ring of Ismail on the ring finger. Smelling the faint pear blossom fragrance on Ismail, I expressionlessly broke free, and refused. No need. I continued to be busy packing my luggage. Lyra. Ismail's voice became angry. Looking at my actions, he reached out, and grabbed my hand. Are you playing the running away from home routine again? I've already said that there's nothing between me and Zara. I know. I calmly pulled my hand back. You are just friends. It seemed that I had choked him. Ismail's face was uncomfortable. He let go of his hand reluctantly and frowned. Then what are you making a fuss about? I'm on a business trip. I explained. Ismail's face looked even worse. He stared at me for a long time, seemingly trying to see signs of pretense on my face. But there was nothing. My reaction was always calm. Because I don't care anymore. Who he watches movies with. Who he doesn't come home with at night. Who he goes on a date with. It's all up to him. Seeing that I wasn't angry, Ismail was even angrier. Seeming to think that I was being awkward with him, and wanting to make up for it on his own initiative. He took out his phone and was about to book movie tickets. I watched him impatiently searching around in a mess. Finally, I couldn't help but gently remind him, that movie has been taken off the shelves. Ismail's fingers on the screen froze. At that moment, I saw several emotions on his face. The air was filled with a silent oppression. The food on the table gradually cooled down. I bent down, put the last item into the suitcase, and closed the suitcase. After that day, Ismail suddenly became enthusiastic towards me. During my business trip for a few days, he greeted me regularly in the morning and evening and asked me about the time of my return. I told him. On the day of my return, when I came out of the airport, I saw his car, a black Bugatti, parked by the roadside. Seeing me, he quickly got out of the car and naturally came over and took my luggage. But when I got to the car with him, I saw Zara in the passenger seat. She was sitting with her legs crossed carelessly, her hand on the car window. Seeing me, she smiled sweetly. "Sister-in-law, hitch a ride. I'll give you the passenger seat later." She was playful, saying so, but she didn't show any intention of moving. Ismail came over after putting away the luggage. Seeing me standing still, his tone was a bit uncomfortable. She happened to be nearby. "We'll take her back on the way. She gets carsick. Let her sit in the passenger seat on this road." During the previous argument, I brought up the old score of Sarah occupying the passenger seat every time we traveled. But before I could speak, Sarah had already stuck her head out of the car window. Her smiling eyes curved as she took over. Fortunately, Ismail is nearby today. Otherwise, in that place where not even a bird shits, I can't even get a taxi. Sister-in-law, don't you believe me? There are chat records in the group. That group is the group of childhood friends from their compound. I'm not in the group. Of course, if Ismail still refuses to help, I'll complain to godfather and godmother. Sarah continued to say. She pretended to punch Ismail's chest. When her arm was halfway out, it was as if she remembered something and withdrew it. She blinked at me with a look of fear. "Sister-in-law, I'm just used to it. I don't mean anything else." Since the big fight with Ismail last time, Zara has changed from being unrestrained in touching to being seemingly guarded in touching. It seems that everything is because of my being overly fussy that made her deliberately keep a distance from Ismail. But if Sarah really wants to keep a distance consciously, then why did she start staying out all night and having private dates with them again soon? I clearly felt the faint provocation in her eyes. This little trick, in the past, would definitely anger me. But now, I'm too lazy to deal with it. Even when Ismail asked Sarah to get out of the car, I directly waved my hand and opened the back door. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I still have a friend. He's on the way. I'll take him and sit in the back. Friend. Where? Before Ismail was surprised, someone called my name. Looking back, my face immediately changed. I saw a handsome guy with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, dressed gaudily, dragging a suitcase and excitedly chasing after me. As soon as he stood still, he complained to me. "Lyra, you are not loyal. I just took my luggage. In a blink of an eye, you disappeared." The man said pitifully and hugged my arm. "Kokufis lie." This scene stunned both Ismail and Zara. Soon, Ismail reacted and pulled me over. "This is the friend you mentioned?" His voice contained displeasure. Staring at the man in front of him, the frown between his eyebrows could kill a mosquito. "Yes. I'm Lyra's good sister." Yazil. Yazil shook hands with Han Cheng generously. Familiarly put his luggage in the trunk and then sat in the back seat with a plop. He waved excitedly at me. "Lyra, come up quickly." I got in the car but was stopped by Ismail. "Wife. Men and women should keep a proper distance. It's not appropriate for you to sit with a man." He was very close to me. I seemed to hear the grinding of his upper and lower teeth. I was puzzled. "Just a sister." I glanced at Zara, who was still sitting steadily in the passenger seat out of the corner of my eye. For a moment, Ismail was speechless. Isiel chatted with me all the way, making the front seat extremely quiet. It's not that Zara didn't talk. She has a lively personality. Every time we travel, she always chatters non-stop with Ismail. From things when they were young to recent gossip in the compound. The two of them talk back and forth. But it's always topics that I, who am left out in the back seat, can't join in. But today, no matter how Zara tried to start a topic, Ismail was indifferent. The 30-minute doctor ended in 15 minutes. After seeing off the two people in the car, he took the initiative to open the passenger door. Come and sit in the front. I looked at it inexplicably. I'm tired. Let's go back quickly. I closed my eyes and rested. In the silence, Ismail's door closing sound was heavier and louder than before. Ismail entered the house with a black face. As soon as I changed my shoes and stepped out of the entrance, I saw him sitting in the living room smoking. The scarlet flame was reflected on his face, and his expression was alternately bright and dark. What's the relationship between that guy and you? Ismail took a deep drag on his cigarette, and then crushed it hard in the ashtray. Looking up, he asked me. I looked at him. A sister? A big man over 1.80 m is your sister? Lyra. Did you go crazy this time? You've been with this big man for several days. The more he said, the angrier he became. Ismail kicked the suitcase hard. I was also angry. I opened the suitcase. Looking at his furious look, I retorted, when on a business trip, the partner is either male or female. He has a good personality, and we get along well. What's wrong with being a sister? Of course there's a problem. He's a man. What kind of sister is a man? What? There can be a female friend. Can't there be a male sister? I choked him with one sentence. I have never seen so many wonderful expressions on Ismail's face. There was shock, regret, and grievance. He almost squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. Sarah is different. She grew up with us. If anything were going to happen, it would have happened already. I and Yasil are also different. Can't we trust each other a little? I interrupted him and said firmly. Ismail was at a loss for words. For several days in a row, he was in a cold war with me. After a few days of lukewarmness, his parents called us to have a meal. At the dinner table, my parents-in-law noticed that the atmosphere between us was not right. They hinted and admonished Ismail. Chang, Lyra married far away for you. You can't be unkind to Lyra. Ismail and I are. I am an only child. According to the original plan, I should have returned to my hometown for development after graduation. But for him, I resolutely stayed here. Hearing what his parents said, Ismail's expressions softened. Before leaving, he took the initiative to hold my hand. Lyra. Before he could finish speaking, Ismail's neck was hugged. Ismail, it's rare for you to be back. Let's get together. It was Sarah. Once again, she unabashedly put her arm around Ismail's shoulder. But this time, Ismail didn't respond with a smile as before. Instead, he pushed away her hand and looked at me uneasily. Farah also noticed me. She clicked her tongue and started making faces. So it's sister-in-law? Saying that, she also took a big step back carefully and just stepped back into the arms of a group of people who followed. Ismail, you didn't even bubble up in the group when you came back. If it weren't for Zara saying that she saw you, you would have escaped like this. That's right. It's so rare for everyone to be so complete. Let's get together. A group of people coaxed. Obviously, there was longing on Ismail's face. But different from before. He didn't immediately agree. Instead, he asked me with his eyes. Everyone also noticed. Although they were married, these people more or less kept a distance from me. Firstly, I wasn't in their circle. Secondly, because of Zara. At gatherings with me, they couldn't let go. Why don't we go and get together? Ismail tentatively asked me. Almost at the same time, I sensed the tension in the atmosphere. Sarah was even more obvious. She pouted and kept winking at the people around her. Everyone was waiting for my answer. They didn't expect me to go but expected me to let Ismail go. As they wished. I withdrew my hand from Ismail's palm. My voice was calm and gentle. I said, "Then I'll take a taxi home by myself." No one spoke. The atmosphere, strangely, fell silent. After a while, Ismail hesitated to speak. It seemed that he was relieved and also guilty. Then, "I'll come back early." He comforted me with a promise. And I just smiled and walked straight out of the yard. When I turned my back, I don't know who suddenly exclaimed, "Ismail, has sister-in-law changed? She's not jealous of Zara anymore? And she let you go with us?" At 11 o'clock at night, Ismail didn't come back. And I didn't ask. Because I just made an appointment with Yazil. With several friends in succession, I went to the liveliest bar in the local area. The exciting music beat on the eardrums, bringing a kind of unrestrained feeling of forgetting everything. A few of us chose a spacious booth and quickly started having fun. After several rounds of drinking, the person next to me suddenly excitedly pointed at a place and shouted, "Damn! They're having so much fun over there." As soon as everyone heard it, they immediately became interested and looked back. I also looked back. At a glance, a gathering of acquaintances. At that table not far away were exactly Ismail's childhood friends from the compound. 7 men and 1 woman. The table was piled with wine bottles. Ismail was sitting in the main seat. His face couldn't be seen clearly from a distance. But judging from his actions, he was looking down at his phone. Soon, his phone was taken away by Zara. Then, Zara straddled up again and put her arms around his neck, waving the wine bottle in her hand. Everyone was used to it. Even they all stood up and coaxed. It seemed to be playing the king's game. Feeding wine mouth to mouth. "This woman is awesome." Just now she was asked to take off her underwear. Without saying a word, she took it out and hung it on the neck of the person next to her. This operation is beyond the reach of Tanjong Feis. I've seen men straddling women. I've never seen 7 men and 1 woman. Everyone was laughing. I didn't. Because I saw that Ismail put down his phone. Amid everyone's coaxing, he lets her bend down with wine in her mouth and open her lips to respond. It was extremely disgusting. Sarah didn't succeed in feeding. Because I walked over, I slapped someone. The scene was very ugly. Ismail's group of brothers tried to smooth things over and said it was just a joke. Sarah said a grieved lie that it was just a game. And I, expressionlessly, threw the underwear that she had still hung on someone else's body onto her face and turned around and left. "If you like to play, just wait until I divorce Ismail and play slowly." Before leaving, I said, I was serious. Because I was really tired. But Ismail didn't agree. He chased me back home. "Wife, we were really just playing a game. Zara is used to being naughty with us. We didn't treat her as a woman at all. Wife, you also lost your temper just now." "At most. I promise from now on that I will definitely not be with them again." "Lyra, I didn't say that you went to a bar with a group of men either." The more he coaxed, the more impatient he became. Finally, he grabbed his hair and shouted at me. At this moment, I had already packed my luggage. I had quite a lot of things and couldn't pack them all at once. But I don't want to stay with him for even a second now. "Get out of the way." I looked coldly at his arm in front of me. Looking up, my voice was unexpectedly calm. True disappointment is not making a big fuss. It's like me now. Ismail was frightened by my expression. His tall figure stiff and slightly. His face flushed red by the smell of alcohol was black. He gritted his teeth and said, "You have to be so serious. Ismail, can you accept me sitting on Yazil like that?" I asked. Ismail froze. I sneered and took a step closer to him. "You can't. When you saw us on a business trip and sitting in the back seat together, you were angry and in a cold war with me for several days. So, why do you ask me to turn a blind eye?" That's different. Ismail blurted out. I am a man. You are a woman. When I go out, I won't be taken advantage of. Hearing Ismail's words, I was once again shocked by his views. I felt like I was seeing this person for the first time. My body trembled unconsciously. I couldn't believe it and said, "So, you all have known all along. You know that Zara's behavior is wrong, dissolute, and disgusting, but just because she is a woman. So you enjoy the sense of accomplishment brought by taking advantage of her?" Ismail was unable to say a word after being countered by me. It was like the fig leaf was torn off. His face was alternately green and white. He unconsciously shifted his gaze. I was right. I couldn't help laughing. Ismail was deliberately found by me to anger you, I said. Ismail's gaze turned back and there was surprise on his face. Immediately after, I said again, because at first I thought that you just didn't recognize the proper boundaries that should exist in male-female relationships. I wanted you to understand through empathy. But I was wrong. You didn't not know. You just enjoyed it. I pushed him away forcefully. Ismail, a big man over 1.80 meters, was caught off guard and sat on the ground. I ignored him. Ismail, let's get a divorce. Otherwise, I will look down on you even more. Ismail didn't agree to divorce. He even brought out my parents. Ismail had a very good image in front of my parents. He had a high education, was handsome, and his parents were highly educated. He founded his own company right after graduation. When we got married, he showed full sincerity. So, they helped Ismail persuade me. But after only a few days of persuasion, the wind changed. Because Ismail became famous. The incident at the bar was somehow filmed and put on the internet by someone. All of a sudden, the whole network knew that Zara sat on the lap of a married man and tried to feed wine mouth to mouth and was slapped hard by the original wife. The public opinion was one-sided. All were scolding Zara and Ismail. So cheap. She still sticks to someone who has a wife. It's not that she sticks to someone who has a wife. She can stick to anyone. Haven't you seen that her underwear is still hanging on the neck of the person next to her? Damn. I slut? The man is also disgusting. With so many people. Aren't they afraid of getting sick? At first, Sarah still argued with netizens, saying that they had dirty minds and saw people dirty. There was only pure friendship between men and women who grew up together. But netizens didn't buy it. They started frantically digging up her information and various accounts. As a result, more and more was dug up. She wore her brother's clothes, slept in her brother's bed, drank from the same cup of milk tea, shared an ice cream, and held hands tightly. The most excessive time was when she sneaked into the private men's lounge wrapped in a bath towel and soaked with the brothers. All these were recorded in her daily life. The words between the lines were full of pride. Zara became famous. Ismail became famous. The people in his compound also became famous. All those who had girlfriends broke up. Singles also lost the opportunity to be in the market. Marketing accounts jokingly called them Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Netizens said this was the time Snow White was blackened the most. Looking at all this, I actually felt a little pleased inside. Sarah was like a cancerous tumor. In my relationship with Ismail, it grew bigger and bigger. I tried to cut it out. But Ismail never cared. Now, the cancerous tumor has backfired. But I have withdrawn in advance. After being on the headlines for a few days, the public opinion was still suppressed. Ismail and his group were all wealthy and powerful young masters in the local area with great connections. In just one night, all these negative comments were deleted completely. Zara's account was also completely emptied. After a few more days, Ismail's parents came to see me. They begged me to go and see Ismail. He drank so much that he vomited blood. When he was found and sent to the hospital, he was already in a deep coma. After a night of rescue, he barely survived. Lying on the hospital bed, he kept murmuring my name. I know that this time it was Cheng Cheng who did wrong. But for the sake of your marriage, Just go and see him. Lyra. Just consider it as mom and dad begging you. I went to the hospital. Ismail had lost a lot of weight. The loose hospital gown hung on him loosely. His face was pale and almost transparent. Only when he saw me did his lost face have a glimmer of radiance. I walked over and stopped his struggling to get up. When will you be discharged? I asked. Ismail's eyes lit up, and he opened his mouth with difficulty. Next week. Lyra. Are you willing to forgive me? I promise. If you give me another chance, I will definitely not make the same mistakes as before and promise to keep a distance from Zara. When you are discharged from the hospital, let's go through the divorce procedures. I shattered his illusion. Looking at Ismail's face distorted with pain, big beads of sweat on his forehead slid down along his temples and contours. His voice was rough as if filled with sand. Lyra. I didn't cheat. You know that. That was all just playing. If you don't like it, I promise to draw a clear line from them in the future. Lyra. I beg you. Don't leave me. Seeing that I was unmoved, Ismail simply rolled off the bed and knelt in front of me. He pulled down the hanging bottle. With a crash, it scattered all over the floor. Even the indwelling needle was crooked. It cut his hand and blood splattered. It was very messy and tragic. When has Ismail ever been like this? His family is well off and he is good looking. All along, it has always been girls surrounding him. As proud as he is, when would he beg for mercy from a woman? I should be touched. But I'm not. I just looked down at him condescending. I didn't even have the intention to bend down and help him. I shook my head and refused. Not good. My indifference hurt Ismail. I could clearly feel his pain and despair. There was even a hint of incomprehension. Aaron. Obviously it was Zara who took the initiative to approach us. Although I didn't refuse. I didn't do anything wrong to you either. Why do you have to hold on to it? He collapsed and shouted. It seemed that his wound was pulled. Blood soon seeped out from his waist and abdomen. The scarlet color was shocking. The commotion quickly attracted both sets of parents. Seeing this scene, the scene was in chaos. Lyra. Ismail did make a mistake. But the culprit is Zara. Our Ismail just treats Sarah as a younger sister. He was also deceived. As the saying goes, it takes 100 years to cross the same boat and 1,000 years to share the same pillow. We have all seen your journey with Ismail. Do you really have to come to this point? I promise that as long as you and Ismail don't divorce, from now on, all the houses, cars, companies and savings will be in your hands. If there is a next time, let Ismail leave with nothing. My father-in-law spoke to guarantee. He had absolute say in the family. Sure enough, my parents were tempted. They looked hesitant. Lyra. This time the Han family is still sincere. Ismail is like this. He really knows he was wrong. My mom pulled me aside and whispered. My dad wanted to refute but was stared at by my mom. She pulled his ear. Old Lou. I know what you want to say. We can afford to raise our daughter. But a child in Lyra's belly can't be without a father either. Yes. I'm pregnant. For 1 month. Originally I planned to find an opportunity to get rid of it. But unexpectedly, it was discovered by my parents. The elders' regard for life far exceeded imagination. They looked at Ismail. Although they didn't express their stance, their expressions were softer than when they first met. Obviously, they wanted to give Ismail another chance. Finally, I agreed to give Ismail a chance. As long as he had no contact with Sarah for a month, I would no longer consider divorce. Witnessed by both sets of parents. A look of joy appeared on his face. He readily agreed. It seemed that my proposal was an easy thing for him. Both sets of parents also breathed a sigh of relief. But only I know. For him, this is a losing bet. Ismail blacklisted Zara. He really didn't contact her. He quit the group. Unfollowed all accounts. And even showed me mobile phone screenshots every day to absolutely guarantee his innocence. When Yaseel heard this, he was very surprised. Lyra. You won't get back together with your ex-husband, will you? He came over and gossiped. Although he seemed unruly, he always kept an appropriate distance from me. Yisrael knew about the problems between me and Ismail. During the few days on business trip, he analyzed carefully and gave me a solution. Use one's own spear to attack one's own shield. Let Ismail also experience the taste of having opposite-sex brothers and sisters. The effect was quite obvious. But now, I recognize this man. Our problem has never been Zara. I saw Yaziel's worry. My expression was calm. I am me first. Only then am I the mother of the child. Yaziel was speechless. He looked at me complicatedly and nodded. As a friend, I respect all your decisions. As a man, I understand your determination to leave Ismail. I twitched the corner of my mouth. Without looking, I knew how bleak my expression was now. Even though I had made a decision, I still had red eyes at the moment I turned around. My flat belly didn't make me feel like a mother. But I admit, it was for this child that I didn't directly mention divorce and decided to give Ismail a chance to empathize. Unfortunately, he didn't seize it. After the anesthetic took effect, I didn't know anything. So, I didn't know that I had experienced a life and death race. The patient has unstoppable massive bleeding. Where is the patient's family? The signature is needed immediately. When the doctor rushed out of the operating room, Yaziel was stunned. The document was stuffed into his hand. But he couldn't prove that he was related to me. Can I leave it blank for now? Her parents are not in the local area. The husband is still busy. What a joke. Hospital regulations. Hurry up and call her husband. The patient is in very dangerous condition. The doctor was full of anxiety. Yaziel suddenly woke up. He frantically called Ismail. 1, 2, 3, 13, 33, 53. Not answering. Even when it reached the 53rd call, the phone was directly hung up. From the initial anxiety to panic. And finally, Ismail was directly in answer the phone. Ismail, your wife is almost dead. How can you have the face to celebrate another woman's birthday? He shouted hysterically in the hospital corridor. The onlookers, including medical staff and patients, stopped one after another. Looking at this scene, they couldn't help being moved. They scolded the scumbag and helped solve the problem. Later, someone said that if you can't find the person, try to find someone who can find him. Yaziel was enlightened. Using my mobile phone, he dialed another number. Ismail arrived 15 minutes later. Following him were my parents-in-law. When Ismail came, he was covered in cake and cream. His tie was loosely hanging around his neck. The collar was wide open. His hair was all wet. All these were what I heard from Yaziel after I woke up. You have a naturally thin uterine wall, which caused massive bleeding. But fortunately, the rescue was timely. In the end, the uterus was still saved. Yaziel sighed at my luck. I was expressionless and asked, "Is Ismail still kneeling outside?" This time Ismail knelt at the door of the ward. No one pleaded for him. My parents-in-law knew they were in the wrong. After the operation, my mother-in-law comforted me for a long time. Before leaving, she still held my hand reluctantly. "Lyra, you have been married for so many years. My son is hopeless. If you want a divorce, we will not persuade you anymore. Follow your own will." Coming back to my senses, I met Yaziel's complicated gaze. My expression was calm. "Help me out." Yaziel wanted to persuade me, but he couldn't persuade me. He could only help me onto a wheelchair and push me to the door. In the corridor of the ward, Ismail knelt straight. He was still wearing the wrinkled suit from daytime. There was a bruise on his cheekbone. It was Yaziel who hit him. In full view of everyone, Ismail didn't fight back. And now, with people coming and going, Ismail, who always didn't like being watched, seeing me, there was pain and sadness on his face. But before he could speak, I had already thrown a document over. You lost. These concise 3 words made Ismail's face change drastically. In the noisy corridor, there were many discussions from onlookers, but none of them could suppress his heavy breathing. He didn't even look at the document on the ground. He stared at me fixedly. As a smart person, he quickly sensed something was wrong. You deliberately chose today. Just to make me choose. Make me regret. The more he said, the more painful he became. Finally, he punched his temple hard, and I rolled my eyes. You think too much. No matter what choice you make. I don't want this child. My voice was weak. I leaned against the wall feebly. I hit the nail on the head. I also know very well that you can't do this. Even if this matter is very simple. Just don't contact Sarah for one day. But such a simple thing. Sarah saved our lives when we were in elementary school. So, we promised her that we would gather on her birthday. That group of people led by Lu Chang found a container and slept for one night. As a result, when they woke up the next day, they were already thousands of meters high in the air, teetering. Fortunately, Sarah, who secretly followed them, discovered them in time and saved them. Since then, Sarah has been included in this group of men, becoming the well-deserved group favorite. But it's their business that they love and spoil her. Ismail agreed to divorce. All the procedures were completed. Soon, a month's schooling off period passed. When we came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, his expression was like mourning. He was not reconciled. He begged me to give him another chance. He said he wanted to atone. Said he loved me. His tall body hunched over, almost breaking his waist. From begging at the beginning to pestering at the end, during the struggle, neither of us noticed that we had reached the road. Nor did we notice that a red BMW was driving straight towards me. Everything happened too fast. When I reacted, it was like a slow-motion freeze frame in a movie. Before he flew out, the last sentence he said to me was, "I'm sorry." At that moment, my heart stopped. Accompanied by the heavy object landing, I rushed over. And at this moment, Sarah rushed out from the passenger seat. Seeing that it was Ismail who was hit and flew away, she went crazy and roared. She clamored for me to die and rushed at me with a knife. But soon, she was pressed on the car hood by the patrolling police and the knife in her hand was taken away. Lyra, why don't you die? If it weren't for you, how could they all draw a clear line with me one by one? It's all because of you. Bitch. I will kill you. Sarah was crazy. Because on the day of the operation, my parents-in-law saw Ismail and a group of people from the compound at Zara's place. They were extremely angry. Together with several families, they boycotted the Zhang family. To appease the anger, the Zhang family decided to sacrifice Sarah, send her abroad and order her never to come back for the rest of her life. And those family young masters who originally regarded her as a mascot immediately drew a clear line with her when their own interests were truly touched. For Sarah, this was the darkest moment. And she thought that the culprit of all this was me. If I died, everything could return to normal. I listened and only felt absurd. Ismail survived, but he was paralyzed from the waist down. Sarah was not sentenced to death, but she was convicted of intentional injury and sentenced to life imprisonment. I heard that in prison. For some reason, her face was cut and disfigured. After Ismail's accident, many people came to find me. His parents, his friends, my parents. His parents begged me to not abandon Ismail at this time for the sake of our past relationship as husband and wife. His friends hoped that I would stay and accompany Ismail through the difficulties for the sake of his saving my life. My parents hoped that I would go home quickly and not stay here and look for trouble. Finally, I went to see Ismail, the once proud man, now lying on the hospital bed. He needed someone to take care of him for eating, drinking, and toileting. But when he looked at me, his eyes were full of remorse. I thanked him. After all, he saved my life. I know I'm not qualified to ask you to stay. Ismail choked and spoke. His voice was hoarse and full of grief. Now all this is my own fault. It's my retribution. The doctor didn't sentence you to death. Cooperate with treatment actively. You still have a chance to stand up, I said. When Ismail heard this, he was excited, looking at me expectantly. He said nervously and carefully, "So are you willing to?" I'm already preparing to go back to my hometown. You know, I am an only child. If it weren't for you, I should have returned to my hometown for development after graduation. My tone was unhurried. At that moment, I saw Ismail's face darken, just like a sunflower that had lost its vitality. His eyes were red. His smile was bitter and self-deprecating. I knew that a useless person like me should rot in the mud for the rest of my life. Ismail, we each have our own lives. You can't affect me anymore. Nor should you be affected by me. I interrupted his self-pity. Perhaps my gaze was too sharp and directly hit his heart. The ward was so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. The sunlight outside the window shone on me through the glass. It was as if I was covered with a layer of golden light. I returned to my hometown. One after another, I could hear news from Nanchang. Ismail stood up again into years. But the illness delayed the company's development. So he could only end it. Another new year. Yazil sent me a message. Happy New Year. When I received the text message, I was helping my parents make dumplings. I wiped the white flour on my hands. Looking at the selfie he sent of sitting on the balcony alone, I couldn't help teasing. Spending the new year alone again? Why don't you come to my parents' house? I can take you in for a few days. Soon. A reply came from the other end. No. My partner will be unhappy. He was referring to his first love who had passed away many years ago. I raised my eyebrows and continued to reply, not bad. After so many years, you still abide by male morality. Of course. Sisters also need boundaries. I laughed. I looked up and looked out the window. It was snowing. The scenery was very beautiful.